Welcome to our April Midweek Experience. This month, we will celebrate the holy days of Palm Sunday, Good Friday, and Easter. During our midweek time together, we will explore how God foretold the work of the Messiah through the prophet Isaiah. We'll recognize how God has repeatedly drawn his people to himself throughout the ages, teaching them to trust in him. The purpose of this first session is to provide you with the context and historical background of the book of Isaiah. The book of Isaiah is the first of the prophets in the English canon and is known, along with Jeremiah and Ezekiel, as one of the major prophets due to the length and scope of their writings. This incredible Old Testament book is filled with poetic imagination, prophetic vision, and a complex structure. Written during a tumultuous time in the history of Israel, this book is a collection of prophetic sayings directed towards different groups over the course of several generations. First, Isaiah writes to his fellow Israelites who have become a rebellious people, then to the defeated Israelites in the 6th century who were in exile in Babylon, and finally to believers of the generations to come who will be responsible for upholding God's covenant. The words he proclaimed were filled with warning, confrontation, and rebuke for God's people because of their unfaithfulness. Isaiah writes in chapter 6 that he was called by God to serve God's people in the year that King Uzziah died, which was in the 8th century BC. During that time, Israel had been split into two kingdoms, Israel and Judah. The first portion of his book, chapters 1 through 39, describes this time and the coming judgment at the hands of the Assyrians. The prophet emphasizes sin, the call to repentance, and judgment. Isaiah provided guidance to two of the kings of Judah during his time, Ahaz and his son Hezekiah. During Ahaz's time, the kingdom of Judah was threatened by Syria and Israel. Ahaz, not trusting in God, went against the advice of Isaiah and summoned the help of the Assyrians to combat the threat. This event led to the assimilation of the northern kingdom of Israel by the Assyrian Empire around the year 721 BC. Emboldened, Assyria then threatened the kingdom of Judah. King Hezekiah instead turned to and trusted in God for deliverance, and the Assyrian army was destroyed. The next section of Isaiah's book, chapters 40 through 66, looks ahead more than a century to encourage the people of Judah who would be taken into exile in Babylon. The eventual downfall of Judah could be foreseen in Hezekiah's unguarded openness to Babylonian influence. Isaiah recognized that Hezekiah's enthusiasm for Babylon meant a future of captivity for God's people. While the first part of the book focuses on indictment and judgment, the latter portion focuses on God's forgiveness, deliverance, and the restoration of Israel. In spite of the nation's rebellion, Isaiah pictured a coming day when God would demonstrate the majesty of his mercy and grace. Isaiah's purpose was to declare the good news that God will glorify himself through the renewed and increased glory of his people, which would draw the attention of the nations. To fulfill that promise, Isaiah accused God's people of sin and rebellion against the one who made them and redeemed them. He instructed those sinners to reform their ways and act obediently, and announced God's judgment on the people because of their sin. Finally, he revealed God's future restoration of his people. As part of his restoration, Isaiah foretold both judgment on the nations and a future turning of the nations to God. Throughout his message, Isaiah employs the following themes: God, the Holy One of Israel, trust and confidence in God, and the Messiah, servant and Redeemer. The book of Isaiah is a vision of hope for sinners through the coming Messiah, promising a new world for the redeemed people of God, where evil is defeated and sorrow will be forever forgotten. Just as Isaiah called the people of God to repentance, encouraged them during the time of exile, and set their vision towards a future Messiah and Redeemer who would be God's faithful servant for all time, his words serve to teach and encourage us today.